All right, welcome back to Extraordinary Unlocked. We have a wonderful guest, Andy Kaufman. Andy and I worked together years ago and
Mhm.
have kept in touch over the years. And one thing I'll say about Andy, he is so humble. And when I dove deep into his career and also just some of the work he's done, prolific podcaster, top 50 in all management podcasts and has reached episode 500. And he even says in Apple Podcasts that he started in '09. Where were you in 2009? That was a long
Yeah.
time ago.
That
But
was.
Andy is an incredible leader, extremely humble, and what I would say is so consistent over all the years we've known each other. I've never seen a different Andy. He's
Mm.
always shown up the same way, positive, encouraging, energizing, influential, impactful. And so, extraordinaires, as you're listening, you're in for a treat. Andy, thank you so much for being on the pod. Would love for you to just do a quick intro of yourself and sort of where you've come from. And then I'm going to ask you a few questions from there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's a very kind and generous intro, by the way. Thank you. You know, as of right now, I run an organization that, anybody listening can maybe relate to this. Have you ever been put into a situation where you have to hit a deadline, but you weren't necessarily trained in how to do it? Yeah. And we have people all over the world that are like, yeah, exactly. Like, okay, you got to hit this date, and or stay within budget. Like, how do we do that? Just do it, So we run a company that helps people do that, teach project management, things like that. But I started my career as a software developer. So connecting those lines or those dots sometimes is really difficult to do. But I'm truthfully, Eugene, I'm a geek at heart, even to this day. I'm a geek at heart, a software developer at heart. But now I'm doing something quite different.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm going to start asking this question to kick it off is what was the first job you ever had? Maybe it was after college or even before college in high school
Oh
or
yeah.
even before that. And would love to hear what was the first job you ever had?
Uh, I delivered newspapers, and this is back in the day when you did it on your bike, and you had the baskets on the back of the bike, and you had to go collect door to door for people to pay for it. And I lived in Central Illinois, and it was the Chicago Daily News. When you're in Central Illinois, I think we only had 21 subscribers or something like that. But I went. It was over 15 miles a morning, and so it was
Wow.
yeah, and it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're in the area in the central part of the U.S. where it gets plenty of snow, and so it's one of those things where I felt like the pay was good for a kid of that age.
What was
It
the pay? I'm so curious. What was the pay?
I don't even remember, but all I knew is I could afford candy bars, and I knew that I could, like, I felt like I was living on top of the world, but I honestly don't remember what it was, but I had to go door to door to collect, and I hated that.
Wait, you were
Ex
the bill collector as well?
Exactly, back in then, they didn't yeah, 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 so it was, and I didn't really think about how uncommon it was to have to get up at, like, 5 o'clock in the morning and deliver papers, but, people were kinda cranky if it didn't show up at a certain time, and, there's the forced exercise of it, and there was just a lot of things that you could argue were blessings out of it, but it was, uh, it was not easy, but at the time, I don't think I was smart enough to realize how how big of a pain it was. And
That's
so,
phenomenal. I love it that I'm trying to imagine how old were you when you were doing the paper route?
yeah, it must have been 10, 11, or 12. Could you even imagine
Yeah.
parents letting their kid out by themselves? You know?
Riding a bike for 15 miles,
Yeah,
and
it
this
was
is not
crazy.
like an ergonomic bike, it's probably just a I don't even know, a
Yeah.
dirt road, but I don't even know what you would
Yeah,
call
yeah, I don't even know how you describe it now. I can kind of envision it, but it's one of those things where because it just had the saddle baskets on the back,
my
it
god. Yes.
it, but, I had a lot of time talking to myself. I probably, I learned how to ride my bike with no hands, and there is something about the quiet time of by yourself with all that, but got bit by a dog. I mean,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh, there's so
yeah,
many and I love it that the reason why I ask about first job, it's so incredible to hear about origin stories and where
mm,
it all stems from because all of us, we have to work, do
yeah,
something to earn money,
mhm,
and would love to know just as you moved beyond the paper route,
yeah,
got into
yeah.
software, and I'm curious just when did you start doing software? Because this is when tech was, like, very almost like low key,
Right.
not the big booming industry that it is today. It wasn't part of
Yeah.
the Magnificent Seven, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But tell me more, how did you even find that niche of, "I'm gonna go into software development?"
Yeah. I had an uncle who had there was this old Radio Shack TRS-80 is what it was called, and
Wow.
I don't remember that you could build those at home, although it might have been a home build, I don't remember, but it was on the leading edge, like, before some of the Atari computers, certainly long before Apple and IBM was doing it, but it was a computer, and he was kind of a geek as well, and he kinda got tired of it, and he goes, "Do you want
Mm.
this?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I couldn't go to sleep. I mean, I would it had, it used the basic language, and basic language was easy enough that I could figure it out and just tinker with it, and
Oh,
so that was late middle school, so it'd be the equivalent of roughly, like, 8th grade, maybe my freshman year, but by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Like, that was it. So,
wow.
whenever a friend would say, "What do you wanna do someday?" to each other, and they go, "I don't know. Maybe if I be an accountant, at least I'll have a job, or I guess I'll have to be an engineer guy." Like, nobody sounded excited about it. I'm sure some of them were, but to me, I was like, this, I want to do nothing but this. And it made it so easy. And I had a teacher in high school who was very supportive that said, "Hey, if you want access to the computers." So I was just surrounded by these people, super generous, Eugene, that were just
Wow.
willing to open up the lab of this. And so it was early on that I knew that's what I want to do.
That's phenomenal. Hearing that story, incredibly powerful. And I'm curious, as you go into college and you sort of find your tribe, because software development
Mhm.
is definitely a smaller group of people.
For
You
sure,
go
especially
through it.
then.
And is it reinforcing that conviction of like, oh man, I'm so doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Well, I'd be taking some of the, gen ed classes or whatever, some of the things you have to take, and I'm like, "This is a waste of time. I wanna be a software developer." I wasn't trying to find myself. But we didn't even really have a software track, as far as major. It was more out of the math department at the time and more of a computer sciences, but
Mhm.
the um, those classes were they felt kind of easy because I had had summer jobs every summer doing software development, and
Really?
so, um, it I took a COBOL class and I got a D in it, and it's the only class I ever got, you know, lower than a B, and here I can be a software developer, but it's because the whole time I'm like, "This is stupid. Nobody codes like this anymore." You know? I was I was just like so unmotivated, But I had forgotten that until I went back and saw a transcript or something recently. But but the entire time, summer jobs doing software, I
Man.
learned so much during those jobs. There's the whole 70-20-10. You learn 70% by doing it. I just did it, and so
Wow.
that was what really really helped.
During that time, I had a friend that actually graduated high school,
Yeah,
got a software development job right out of high school because they knew how to do it, and they made really, I mean, at the
yeah,
time, the group of people available to do that was so
yeah.
small,
Right.
and I just remember being so amazed. His name is Sam, I still remember who he was, and
Yeah.
just like, you can do stuff like that, but it sounds like you were on that track, and so you graduate
Yeah.
software development, and you move into your first company. What company was that?
There was a company in Chicago called Brokerage Systems Incorporated, and so what they did was they would do the software behind, commodities trading
Oh my
firms,
goodness.
and so this is the real world because they go, "Congratulations." And it felt like decent money to me, it felt like it was like, "Okay, great." And it was in Chicago, and I had a girlfriend in Chicago, who's now my wife, by the way. But I'm like, I'm gonna look for a job in Chicago, So, anyway, but the real world kind of really set in when they're like, "And rookie, you are now, in charge of support if something goes haywire in the middle of the night." And so it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm, flipping through all this stuff, trying to figure out what's going wrong. And it was definitely a trial by fire.
Oh
Cause
my.
in school, a lot of what we learn in school is very, the conditions are kind of set and not in the real world, I think most of us, when we come out of college, we don't realize how little we know about how the real world
I
works.
know.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. And so that first job really allowed me to understand that.
Yeah, you're going into straight VUCA environment, and,
Right,
like,
for
you have
sure.
no idea what's coming
Yeah,
up,
Yeah,
And so you
yeah.
learn that and you're doing and it sounds like, I mean, just looking at your career trajectory on LinkedIn, it's not that you just stop there, it just you continue to grow and develop, and would love to hear just how that growth happened.
And there are other fields that are like this, but software, especially during that time, there was always another job.
Mhm.
It's not like I had to, you know, polish up a LinkedIn profile. It's not like I talked to somebody and they go, "Yeah, I'm over here at Baxter now." I'm like, "Well, tell me more about that." It was a big bump in pay and I had a friend who said, I feel like I'm trying to remember how he said it. You're not content. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you keep changing jobs. And I had to
Yeah,
reflect on that, Eugene, because to me, it wasn't lack of contentment. It's just there were and by the way, it might have been, but it was like there was just so many opportunities. And
right.
so it's like, I can make so much more over there. So let's do it. Looks like fun. And that would lead to another opportunity. So it's not like I was changing jobs every year, every other year, but there was a point at which, and I'm sure there maybe AI jobs are like that right now, or
Mm.
maybe, I'm, but during that time, that was just one of those things where and the track was often if someone close to you went to another company, they would pull you, or if a boss went to another company, they would pull
Ah,
you.
yeah,
And that happens today too, right? Where a
yeah.
boss goes somewhere else and like, I want to build up my team. And so that led to some of the changes. But we went from one of the jobs was the first job into management. And I say in my bio now, so before I do a keynote somewhere, it'll usually get read that says he was moved into management for all the wrong reasons. And it's true. It's true. I'm sure you've seen this before where someone's good in the call center, so let's make them the manager of call centers, or they're good at this. It's like the halo effect. And I was put into management not because I had the skills or the training to do it, but
Mhm.
because there was an open position because of a buyout, and they're like, "Oh, he doesn't seem too mean, put him in a leadership role." Lots of stories along those lines.
As you move into that, because and I'm gonna be really candid. We used to run a program where there are folks that are interested in management, moving into a
Mhm.
leadership role, and so we had a program to help prepare people. And a lot of times, what was great is people did not go into management, and
Right. You could self-select
because
out.
they realize they're like, I don't wanna hold difficult conversations, I
Yeah,
don't wanna hold people accountable,
yeah,
and I'm actually very content and happy with what I'm doing and becoming the
yeah.
subject matter expert, and we used to say, "I'm so happy," because it
Mhm.
didn't have to result in a performance improvement plan,
Yeah.
difficult
Right.
or difficult conversations of their own
Right.
having difficult conversations,
Eugen,
and
it's so
so
true.
that is, to your point, one of the great challenges and also the realities of people moving into the management realm. And so as you moved into that management realm, did things align? Was there a lot of friction? Did you feel like, okay, I should be doing something like this, or I might want to go back to software development where I'm just my own person?
Well, it's interesting you say that because the guy who announced the promotion, a couple levels above me, and I just remember very distinctively, kind of a big personality. When he walked into the room, he was somebody, and he'd smoke a cigar, and it just Winston Churchill in a tech company,
Yes.
kind of felt like, but he said something along the lines of, "Hey, did you ever think you'd make it to management?" And part of me is like, I think he wants me to say no, but I'm like, yeah, like I did think I would. So maybe I came off as ungrateful, but I made so many mistakes, Eugene. Like I
Mm.
made probably every classic mistake of a new manager, trying to do it all, not delegating enough, not having the difficult conversations,
Yep.
interviewing in my likeness. Um, you
Mm.
know, it's so many mistakes, and so I guess, I guess what makes it easier to teach it these days is I've got so many scars from making mistakes. And let me tell you about this scar. Like all these different mistakes I've made, and I made a bunch of them, and
Yeah.
thankfully I kept my job while making them. But I had to learn a lot as a frontline manager.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of people listening to this that are in management can resonate with that. I think
Hmm.
in theory, just like you were talking about school, what I tell people is school is great. You're getting a piece of paper that's gonna
Yeah.
unlock doors,
Yep.
but that's actually just the starting line.
Right.
You've now reached another level, an
Yeah.
opportunity that you've never done anything before, but you theoretically done a lot of things in. And so that
Mhm.
school of hard knocks is how many leaders learn. And so I think about you're moving into management, you're growing, and I mean, you really did reach some of the top levels at organizations, leading massive teams. And I'm really wondering what made you jump? What was the discontent, stuck feeling?
Yeah.
Because the last person I was speaking to, on the podcast was saying, "There's golden handcuffs." Like, it's
Yeah.
not because of the pay.
No, 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 no.
Not because of the salary. Because oftentimes
Yeah.
we're like, "Oh, this pay is not the what I should be getting." But,
Mhm.
when you reach those levels, you're actually really good financially, and there was still a level of discontent or stuckness that
Mhm.
you may have felt. I would love to hear more about that.
You know, the way I got to a director level was a boss had moved to another company, and he brought me there, and each one of those had bumps in responsibility and pay, and he, he eventually went somewhere else, and, that's not any place I really wanted to go, but I could go back to a previous company, and it'd be at a
Hmm,
VP level, and so at that point, I thought, "VP, I mean, that would be great to be a VP of systems," and had in a domain that I knew pretty well because 'cause I'd been at the company before, a new senior VP that had the reputation of being pretty demanding, but thought, "Well, you know, how bad could it be?" And I I used to say that that boss was, um, the worst boss I ever had to work for, or the best no, this is how I say it, Eugen. This person was the best boss I ever hated to work for. That's what I used to say.
best
The best boss
boss
I ever hated to work for.
ever hated to work for.
Yeah, super demanding,
Mm,
like, never content, and, I would say not necessarily a good billboard for what you might wanna look forward to if you got to that role, you know? You know, like, because sometimes you look at somebody up above you like, "I think I could do that." They're building your confidence that you could actually do that someday. I looked at that and thought, "You could not pay me to do that role."
mm,
And the stuckness kind of got in and around there of by VP level, I'm way too far away from the software development side, and I'm managing managers and sometimes levels of those, and more the budgets and the
mm,
organizational politics. And I looked at it, and the reason why I don't say anymore that this was the best boss I ever had to work for, actually when I teach now, I'll say this boss was the best boss I've ever worked for
mm,
because I just learned so much. I had had really nice ones before,
yeah.
and, you know, sometimes you need someone who's gonna jiggle you and push you and elbow you, and I didn't really like much of it at all, but I did get to the point where I feel stuck. Like,
Mm,
I don't wanna go up, and I'm not even so sure I'm that great at what I'm doing right now, honestly. I think, so there's all this stuff that was going on, and years before, or actually, um about 2 years before I was really feeling this, I started getting this thing about what's the feedback that I get that when I'm doing that, I'm doing it best, and it's developing people, and
mhm,
it's if I'm teaching of some sort of way, and
hmm,
so, the place where I went to church, there's a former head of HR of Motorola, and he goes, I'll
cool.
do he does these offsites that tries to help people kind of along the lines of find their calling, but
Okay.
you know, it's kind of a life coaching thing, I guess we might say in today's vernacular. But he he gets me in a conference room and he goes, "What's your earliest memory?" I'm like a bright light. I don't know, you know, I'm like, how far back are we going? Anyway, we talked about the paper route. We talked about
Mm,
steps along the way. We talked about all this stuff, and he would bracket it, and he would because and he goes for some reason, for example, it might have been this is where my parents got divorced, or this is where we moved to no place. He was looking for these brackets. What are some of these
yeah.
themes in life? And the idea, actually, his worldview in this was if there is a God who doesn't things don't happen by accident, you are maybe are being prepared for the next thing. That was kind of like the idea behind it. And we got to the end of it, and he goes, I think I see this theme where you could run your own company someday. I think I could see that. So there was like this confirmation.
Mhm.
Uh, I wouldn't have said that I knew it was a calling necessarily, but anyway, there was that. And so feeling stuck, but also this sense in the back pocket from a guy who seemed like he knows what he talks about that
Yeah.
maybe there is some future there. So any thoughts as you hear that there?
I mean, as you're talking about it, it's almost like there's this conviction brewing.
Mhm. All right.
The circumstances, the friction, the
Mhm.
just the level of discontent.
Yeah.
And
Right.
yet you learned a lot about yourself, and I was sharing about this on a different episode of when I fell flat, ooh, all the lights are turned on, you know where the flat spots are, and, they're yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Right.
nobody
Right.
else's,
Yeah.
and they're great lessons to grow from, and it sounds
Mhm.
that's what was happening, and that I'm curious how many years before that occurred, that session with, this former HR head of HR at Motorola, when did that session happen, and then when did this, "Oh my gosh, can I really stay in this role and do the thing? I don't want the next level job."
Yeah, it was, 2 years or less. It
Okay.
was about that because I had a probably one of my favorite bosses as far as just a very nice and very
Yeah.
generous boss. He would allow me to start speaking at conferences, tech conferences, and it was a lot
Oh,
of times it was just things we had been learning, but he was supportive of it. He goes, and at one point earlier, Microsoft had called and they said, would you give, because we're using some pretty interesting technology, and they said, would you give a 10-minute demo of what this project was during a keynote at TechEd? So it's like a big conference. And Eugen, at this time when that offer came in, if I had to speak in front of 10 people, I would be so freaked out. I had
really?
deep anxiety, and that was the biggest trigger for the anxiety, having to speak in front of a group of people. So I asked the question when Microsoft called about this. Well, how many people are going to be there? And they said 7,500 people are going to be in the room. 7,500 people. So I would have been a little queasy if it would have been seven,
Right.
but 7,500 people. But for some reason, I said yes.
Wow.
And that was the worst week of my life, probably, because it was only going to be like a week or maybe a week and a half before the thing. I mean, it was
Oh, it
super
was a
close. I
real
mean, it was maybe
turnaround.
it's 2 weeks, but still, I mean, it was just,
Yeah.
and I was so nervous. That company hired a coach for me, and I was freaking out. And the coach is like, "You're pretty nervous?" I'm like, "Yes, 7,500 people." And she goes, "So this is her best advice. This is her best shot." She goes, "Hey, as soon as you stop puking, you lose your edge." Like, oh, so it's okay to be nervous. That's what she said. She goes, yeah, if you weren't nervous, you wouldn't see how big a deal this is. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's not a personal flaw. It's actually normal.
Mhm.
And as I talked to other people that are part of the demos there, we're backstage. They're like, yeah, we're all freaking out. So anyway, it was interesting that, that all went on. And, I lived obviously, and that led to some more opportunities. So that had all been building. That was about 6 years before all this.
Oh, okay.
And it started at one point I had talked to somebody, Eugene. I said, they had asked me, do you do this for a living? And I'm like, you can do this for a living? Honestly, I didn't even know that. I thought it was something you always do on the side. And
Yeah.
that led to the point where I had the conversation with the guy. And so it was kind of, hmm, could this be a thing?
Yeah.
And so now at this point, this is another feeling stuck point though, because it feels like this could be a thing to go off and teach project management and leadership. And I feel stuck though, because that
Mhm.
means there's not a consistent paycheck, right? That was kind of your
Yes.
point before, right? That's
Yes.
taking the lead. And it's better the job, even though it's like, I don't remember this book. It said, sometimes we prefer the misery of uncertainty than the uncertainty of misery, or something like that. I don't think I got it quite right, but even though I didn't like it, there was certainty to it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
A
And
steady
so
paycheck, the things are coming in every month, you know exactly what you're making, and you have the health
exactly,
insurance and
and there's a pretty reliable bonus, and I mean, the bonus would pay for a car, it's like, and there's, yeah, health benefits. How in the world can we walk away from that? So,
yeah.
so my direct boss. So we had a reorg, and so that really difficult boss, there's somebody in between, still the VP title, but he, uh, he goes, "That boss, they're out to get you." I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, I think you probably got less than a year here." I'm like,
Oh, wow.
"Oh, that's good to know." And, so I appreciated the insight, but, that had a way of taking somebody who wasn't at risk of I was pretty risk averse
Right.
to make a jump where, when he said that, it's like, "Man, maybe I should really start looking at this more." And one of the things that former HR guy from Motorola said is before you make the jump, have 12 months of cash liquid, not in a house,
Mm,
liquid, not in a 401k, liquid. And I had about 6 months.
okay.
And, so I talked to my direct boss, his name was Tom. I said, "If I could get a package, we could maybe make this work out. I could make it easier for the company. I could make it easier for me." And he goes, "Well, I'll take a look at it." And he goes, "Yeah, we can give you a 1 month package." I'm like, 1 month? Like, that's terrible. I should never have opened my mouth. That was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Like, oh my goodness. And so I just felt like, oh, I'm an idiot. But anyway, it eventually being 6 month. So I had 6 months,
No, wait,
got a
wait. They
6 month
changed it
package.
from 1 month to 6 months.
They did. Yeah. Yeah.
That's another podcast of how do you negotiate what.
I'd love to tell you it was brilliance on my part, but I think it was provision. It was one of those things where I think there was enough going on at the company that they had to thin the herd a little bit, and so I think there was some motivation on their part to make it easy and stuff like that. So, because it wasn't just me, it was other people too. But that 6 months that I had, plus that 6 months,
Wow.
his point was when you make the jump, people tend to underfund that, and so if they're not making money in the first couple of months, they all of a sudden they're freaking out, and at 4
Yeah.
months they quit. They quit too early on their dream is really where he was. They undercapitalized is what his was. So I had no excuse now
Wow.
to make the jump, and
Wow.
so that's what led to it.
That's amazing because that and I love it that you called that it was provision,
Mhm.
divine intervention. I
Yeah,
don't know how else to explain it because
yeah.
organizations don't wanna give up the cash. I'll tell you that
Oh,
without
yeah,
question.
yeah.
And
You
that
spend enough time on that side of the desk. Yeah.
yes, and it really it started with this conviction, you circumstances are really making itself obvious, but the courage to leap, and
Mm.
you minimize the risk having 12 months liquid, and
Right.
so as you make the jump, what's the feeling day 1?
Well, I'll tell you the feeling week 2 because I started my company 2 weeks before 9/11. So
Oh,
it's not like I had this big book of business, and so then 9/11 hits,
oh,
and, I mean, it certainly didn't the effect of it was not like COVID, whereas for years, but, like, anybody old enough listening will know that, I mean, things shut down, companies were, stopped
yeah,
training. I mean, like the conferences got closed. And so, but here's the thing, the wisdom of that guy was like, we're only 2 weeks in, we've got 50 more weeks of money, and
yeah,
so
yeah,
it actually it was okay. And it wasn't exactly at the 12-month mark, but it was right around there, is give or take a month or two, where we were hitting an amount of revenue, some months high, some months lower, but we were averaging enough to persist. My wife jokes now because at one point I would have 180 vitamins in a vitamin jar, and I'd say, "My goal is to still be in business when I take my last vitamin out of this." And yeah, and so like these incremental, like I take the last vitamin, like, "Honey, there's nothing in it. We're still okay."
yeah,
So, but it was about the 12 to 13-month mark. So the guy nailed it. I mean, the guy was this huge blessing in my life because it gave me permission to run as hard as I could for 12 months
yeah,
and to do everything as possible and innovate as much as possible. And the big break was when I learned in the training business, subcontracting is a very common model. And I would
mhm,
just start subcontracting with some places. And so that not only provided revenue, it provided opportunity to learn the business. And I mean, just I would love to tell you, and I would love to tell all of the extraordinaires listening, that you have to have a brilliant plan, you don't know what you don't know. And so hanging out with other people that are further ahead, I found that was something helpful. What did you
Mm,
learn? And I have found so like we didn't have resources like this right here, so you can hear people's
right.
stories, be inspired by them. So people are far more generous than I think what we realize.
Mhm.
And some guy gave me templates that he uses. Here's the contract I use. I'm like, how do you
Oh,
charge? I mean, people unbelievably generous. And
yeah.
at each step of the way, I just felt like the people that I needed, the insight I needed was available. And it was not brilliance on my part. To this day, I have no idea sometimes where the business comes from. I'm sure the podcast has something to do with it and
Mhm.
LinkedIn, but it's one of those things where you know, uh, almost 25 years into it, that'll be later this year.
Whoa,
It's
congratulations.
yeah, yeah, thanks. Thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
just what you shared, there's so many themes coming out of it. And I love it that you talk about planning because most people, they do like to have a plan. That's why we get stuck is like, well, I don't have
Mhm.
to think about it. Someone sort of got the
Yeah.
course for me and I just follow step by step. That's why schools work. The kids
Right.
don't think about it. They have a
Mhm.
counselor to tell them what they need to take and
Right
accomplish.
on.
But once you move into that entrepreneurial, self-employed world of running your own business, the name of the game is not only persistence on the conviction, but is adaptability.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and I
Yeah.
love it that this is what I found also. I've cold LinkedIn random people just because they're in an industry that I was interested in.
Yeah.
And just like you, extremely generous. Spent
Mm.
30 minutes on a
Right.
call with me just to
Yeah.
share about what they do. And it takes me back to Stephen Covey's 7 habits of the scarcity mindset versus the
Absolutely.
abundant mindset.
Mhm.
And there as someone that's self-employed, sharing templates, sharing contracts, one might think, "Hey, if they're taking business from me, why would
Right.
I give it to them?"
Yeah.
But because there's so much business out there,
It is. It's so
that
true.
abundance just like, "Oh my gosh, I can
Yeah.
share generously," and that's just wonderful. So I appreciate you sharing those nuggets because we haven't
Mm.
heard that before,
Mm.
and it's part of so many people's stories. Like, none of us have arrived on our own.
No.
When I tell my kids about my career, I tell them, there's a metaphor about a turtle that got on a fence just balancing there, and
Yeah.
everyone thinks, "How did it get there?" Someone put him there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's how I feel about how I got to where I'm at, and
Yeah.
Extraordinary Unlocked is part of sharing this collective wisdom, collective experience, divine appointments,
Mhm.
divine
For sure.
interventions, things that you just couldn't explain.
No.
And Tony Robbins, he uses this word grace, that there's just grace that
Mhm.
shows up, and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't deserve it. I don't know how I
Yeah.
got it, but
No.
thank you.
Yeah. And spiritually, I can't earn it, but this is something I learned in the business world is that at each step, Eugen, it would have just been easy to say no. It would have
Mm,
been so much easier to say no to that Microsoft thing, right? And I can't even imagine what would happen if I would have said no to that. I
mm,
wouldn't be what I'm doing now because I'd still
yeah,
believe I can't do it. I had to say yes to that HR guy who took me off site. I could have easily said no, I'm too busy. And so there's so much wisdom in life to say no so you're not adding too much on, right? So knowing what do you say no to and say yes to. But I feel like to really get to your calling, you're probably going to have to say some yeses that are uncomfortable,
yeah,
but there's just this sense that despite the discomfort, go for it, like at least say experiment, and it could just be that the kid who thought he couldn't speak in front of 10 people now speaks in front of thousands.
yes,
And and I feel like it's my calling. Like, how bizarre is that? I thought my calling was software development, but I get to use
yes,
my software, my techie skills now to do stuff that I do now. So I don't know. I didn't see the full picture,
yeah,
but the idea is that there's some yeses along the way. There's some faith along the way. There's being willing to make the ask, like you were saying, being willing to make the ask. All of that can be combined to truly. I feel extraordinarily blessed. I feel like I'm living an extraordinary career that I never dreamed I would. In fact, I would
mm.
have. If somebody told me this, I'd say I would hate that career. That's what I would have said. I would for sure.
I
Yeah,
believe it, and that's I love that you summarized it so well because just talking to you and this is some of the feedback I got about you when you were working at our company, you were doing exactly what you're describing.
yeah,
You were leading a project management course in person and the electricity coming out of that room. the
Mm.
feedback. I love Andy. This guy's amazing. You guys gotta do more courses with him. And so when I switched company, I'm like, "Well, I'm calling this guy up because they need project management." And
Uh,
still the feedback was great. And I love
mm,
it that as you're living into your calling, living into this almost unexpected reality,
for sure.
what's the feeling? What's the vibe? What's sort of like the gratitude you wake up with?
Mhm. Yeah. I don't remember who said it, but isn't there a phrase along the lines of, "If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life," that sort
Right,
of thing? Like, I'm tomorrow, I'm teaching a full day class, and this particular organization still doing virtual. I'd say half our clients are still doing things virtually because it saves them from having to pay for travel for their employees, and
right.
so I'll be standing right here where I am right now all day long, and for some people that would just be miserable, and I will feel just as energized at the end of the day than I do at the start of the day. I mean, it's a class I've probably taught 150 times, and
Yeah,
I'm not like, oh, I gotta do. Like, I always wondered how people on Broadway, how do you do it? Your same script, same song, 8 times a week because it's their calling, right?
yeah,
And so I'm not counting days to retirement. In fact, I'm 65. I could retire now if I wanted to. I don't want to because I love it so much. So when you can find something that's not just because it's a cliche, but you feel like I am doing what I was designed to do,
yeah,
that feeling like I I wouldn't when I say I wouldn't do it for free, I but I do sometimes.
yeah,
I'll do it for free, but
yeah.
it doesn't feel like I'm just doing it for the money. And I'm
Mm,
we've got 5 kids, and I would say each one of them, I would say even early, 3 of them out of the house, they're on their way towards, they love what they do so far,
wow.
and I just want that so much for people because so many
Yeah,
people really dislike their job. They feel what your podcast is really aimed at, stuck.
yes,
And I'm doing it just for a paycheck.
yeah,
And I don't want to presume that there's always this easy path. I didn't know what the path was, but it might be some yeses. It might be some more experimenting. It might be, sample this, and
mhm,
hmm, maybe
yes.
that's one I need to chase out. So,
Yeah, I oftentimes ask what advice you would give, but you've given so much great advice. I think even that last sentence,
mm,
you shared some amazing advice, saying yes to things that
mhm.
would make you feel uncomfortable and see it as an experiment.
Yeah, that's
It's
it.
like when you're going to McDonald's, you're like, "Oh, they've got some hot honey sandwich. Let me just try it.
Right.
I don't like it. Okay, don't do that
Yeah.
for the next 30 years of your career."
That's a good example. That's a
Yeah, but
really good
I
example.
love it that you shared a yes is required though,
Mhm.
and to
Yeah.
take what comes, and it can unlock some powerful things, unlock the personal extraordinary. I believe everyone's got
Mhm.
a
For
gift,
sure.
talent
Yeah.
that just lights them up, and so thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
This has been amazing just diving deep into your career, and I know there's so much more, so I may bring you back and
Anytime,
and
friend.
dive into
Anytime,
every
friend.
other avenue because I love leadership development. I
Mhm.
love just people, and you interact with so many people. I know you didn't mention this, but you also work for the UN. You help
Mhm.
the UN do United Nations do project management courses, and that's just prolific. And so I get to the end of the podcast and I ask some lightning round questions.
Yeah.
And I always start with something food related because that's just near and dear. You're a well traveled man. You've
Yeah.
gone all over the place. On
Yeah.
your last trip out of the country or to a different state, what was the most unique thing you ate? And you're like, huh, never had that before.
Yeah. I was in Italy most recently, and I would say I don't know if I had anything that was particularly weird, like, it was, actually with the UN, and I would say at one of the snack bars, they had a number of things. And one of them, I didn't even ask what it was. So I try to eat stuff that I've not tried before. So
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was good. And so the we've my wife is she's a recently retired flight attendant, so we could fly anywhere inexpensively. So all of our kids touched every continent except Antarctica before graduating high school.
Oh
And
my
so we
goodness.
had stuff in Australia that I don't know. I mean, it was like jellyfish and, all kinds of weird stuff. But it's one of those things where it's so easy to go, let's just eat the same thing all the time. So I'm breaking the rules of the lightning round, but there you go. That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. What a gift to have a flight attendant
Oh
as
man.
a wife. You just especially with 5 kids, because 'cause I'm about to pay for some travel,
Oh
and
yeah, for
my
sure.
wife is not a flight attendant.
Yeah. Marry somebody in the travel industry or get into the travel industry. That's the biggest thing you can take away from today.
If that's your extraordinary calling, yeah,
Exactly.
please.
For sure.
Uh, the
Plus, I
second
really love her, but
That's awesome. Yes, of course, that without saying. Deeply in love and a flight attendant. Just cherry
exactly.
on top. Second question I wanted to ask, and you had alluded to this person, but someone that mentored you, and maybe it was that
Yeah.
person that took you on the retreat, or
Yeah.
someone that took you along the side and just like,
Yeah.
you
So
know.
many along the way. There was that guy, and there was this guy. His name was Tony, and he had like this classic Italian accent. Like you're right out of a cliche, but it wasn't people who would just tell you what you wanted to hear. You know, he'd be like, you're going to this. You're gonna be a salesperson. I'm like, I'm not a salesperson. He goes, no, you. Anyway, they would just people that would just give advice of
Yeah.
think about this. Somebody told me the difference between marketing and sales. I didn't know that. And so I would say there wasn't like this one mentor along the way. It was always just somebody who right there that was willing to share advice. And maybe I was more willing to ask questions than what I realized, but still, it was one of those things where the, uh, uh, well, not one mentor over the time, which I maybe takes some of the pressure off the people listening to us. Like,
Yeah.
who is in your world right now that you don't even have to pay for the coach? It's just they've learned lessons, and over a coffee, they're willing to
Yeah.
share.
Yeah, I love that. Last question, 500 podcasts in.
Mm.
What was the biggest surprise? Just a podcast you record, you're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
that just shocked me."
yeah. Adam Grant is somebody that most people would know.
Yes.
I interviewed him his first podcast interview ever.
No
Ever. He
way!
had never had a podcast interview before, and he and I have joked about
Really?
this a number of times now, yeah. And he, what back when that happened, he wasn't Adam Grant. I mean, he was, but he was just new in the whole
Already?
thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And so one of the biggest surprises was getting in on that early.
Mm,
Actually, he and I'll interact reasonably often now. And he had one of our recordings on his podcast, and so the biggest surprise along the way is you never know who you're going to talk to, what their trajectory will be.
yeah,
You never, uh, in the podcast business, you and I talked about this before recording, make the ask, right? So maybe that's a sub theme through today. Make the ask. One of our guests, she wrote a book called You Already Have the Know. That's the name of the book. And that tells you everything you need to know about the book. If you don't make the ask, you already have a no. So if you make the ask and you get a no, you already have the no. So make the ask. And I
wow,
think when it comes to mentoring, when it comes to a lot of things in life, that's not natural for me, Eugen. It's my natural is to assume they'll say no and don't make the
right.
ask. But
Yes,
that single thing has been a big surprise. How much people are willing to say yes.
Andy, you've given so many golden nuggets throughout this entire podcast. Incredibly grateful for your time, and I just extraordinaires as you're listening, you just have a wealth of information, wisdom from Andy. So Andy, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite and any excuse to talk with you, Eugen. I always enjoy our conversations, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Cheers.